Hello, I'm Les Holroyd, Alcan's Director of Corporate Information in British Columbia. This is the first in a series of news videos to be produced to keep you informed of progress on the Kemano completion project. They will contain information on significant developments in the construction and introduce you to the people who will manage the building of the Kemano completion project. Under the leadership of Project Director Paul Wolf, more than 50 people on the Kemano completion project staff are busy engineering final details, preparing definitive cost estimates, arranging labor contracts, and beginning engineering and construction activities. More than $100 million will be invested in the project in 1989. In addition, another 150 to 200 employees with 5 BC-based engineering firms are also hard at work on project details. Good. During construction, there are 4 primary objectives. Paul Wolf explains the approach he and his team are taking.
The objectives of this project are safety, cost, quality, and schedule. On the subject of safety, as all of you know, safety is job number 1, and we're going to try to accomplish this in the design, so that our employees are less exposed to potential injuries during the operation and the maintenance of the plant. We're trying to achieve safety as a number 1 objective in the construction of the project, so that we will attain or even surpass the objective that were attained on the ground-based smelter in the late 70s, when we achieved a frequency which was 1/10 of the province, a frequency and a severity of 1/10 of the province. In connection with the second objective, which is the cost, we've entered into a fixed price arrangement with BC Hydro, and we're going to have to live with a fixed budget. We're going to have to live with a fixed budget because we're committed to make this plant a profitable plant for the company. On the issue of quality, it really covers 3 subjects: the quality related to the environment, the quality related to the community in Kemano, and the quality related to the plant itself. On the issue of the quality related to the environment, as you know, the environment is a very sensitive topic in Canada, and I would say that in BC they are about 10 years ahead of us in the rest of the country on the issue of environment. So we're trying to design a plant and we're trying to implement a project which will minimize the effect on the environment. Where it cannot be avoided, we'll try to minimize the impact on the environment. On the issue of quality for the resident in Kemano, we've decided to relocate the powerhouse underground so that the effect on the population would be minimized in terms of noise. Noise in the operation of the plant coming from transformer or from generators and turbine. On the issue of quality of the plant itself, we're committed to build a quality plant so that the operation and the maintenance of the plant will be minimized, because as you know, this plant has a physical life of a minimum of 80 years, and we're planning to build a plant which will last a minimum of 80 years. Finally, on the subject of schedule, our contract with BC Hydro is calling for an in-service date of January the 1st, 1995. But we're trying to maintain full flexibility in proceeding with the engineering in every aspect of the project. And if it's demonstrated down the road that the project needs to be accelerated to meet earlier commitment with BC Hydro, which could be of interest to the company, we will be in a position to do so.
It has long been an Alcan practice to make purchases in the communities and areas in which it has operations. This is extended to provide opportunities for businesses and individuals to participate in major projects. In December, more than 150 attended a special meeting in Kitimat to hear for themselves how they would have an opportunity to be a part of KCP. Alcan's Vice President for British Columbia, Bill Rich, introduced the participants. Project Manager Bob Loader outlined the components of the present Kitimat Kemano project, while Project Director Paul Wolf described the main construction aspects which will lead to the installation of a 540 megawatt generating station in Kemano. as Manager of Purchasing, Frank McNamara, explained some of the details of Alcan's policies in this regard. Response was enthusiastic, and numerous pre-qualification forms for contractors and suppliers were distributed. Many of these have already been completed and returned. Only those companies which have pre-qualified will have an opportunity to bid on contracts. The first contract on which competitive bids were accepted has been awarded to a company from Prince George, British Columbia. Bob Loader explains.
We recently awarded our first construction contract for the Kemano completion project. It's for what we call the underground utilities for the Pioneer Camp. The scope of work includes clearing of the site where trailers will be erected in the future. There is grading of those areas also, installation of underground utilities for water, sanitary sewers, power lines, and propane lines. We invited competitive bids from a number of companies, both on the lower mainland of BC as well as from the local area. And the best bid was submitted by Wayne Watson Construction of Prince George. And this was very encouraging to us because the project purchasing policy is to encourage participation of local companies. The contract was awarded to Wayne Watson for more than $250,000. He's in the process of mobilizing his men and materials and equipment to the site, and all the work is expected to be completed by March 3rd.
The alternative hillside route is far less sensitive. It reduces the number of towers along the river from
To minimize any potential for environmental damage and also to improve security, a new power line route parallel to the present transmission line has been selected. The Rivers Defense Coalition, a group of environmental organizations located in British Columbia, has initiated a Federal Court of Canada action against the Federal Minister of Fisheries. In the action, they charge that the minister has improperly exercised his authority over the Nechako River in reaching an agreement with Alcan and the province of British Columbia for the protection of the fisheries resource of that river. Good. Bill Rich, Alcan's vice president for British Columbia, explains the company's position.
Reaching agreement on protection of the salmon resources in the Nechako River has been one of the fundamental preconditions for a Kemano completion proceeding. There have been two reasons for this. First of all, in our uniquely Canadian way, we've contrived to have the water belong to the provinces and the fish belong to the federal government. This issue has never gone to the Supreme Court of Canada, and it's no fun being the test case to do that. Secondly, and equally important, for public acceptability, it's been absolutely necessary to ensure that this goal is met in the design of the project. Ironically, it was a federal court case that provided the framework to reach a settlement on this issue with both the federal and provincial government, and that was accomplished in September of 1987. Most of the people in the province have viewed this as a positive outcome, but there remains a core of people who remain opposed to the project, and their vehicle to continue to oppose it has been to challenge this agreement. They have started an action in the Federal Court of Canada against the Federal Fisheries Minister, essentially challenging his right under the Fisheries Act to enter into the kind of an agreement that has been reached with the province and Alcan. At the moment, he is being defended, as it were, by the Justice Department as his counsel, and Alcan has limited access to the information that's being processed in the pre-trial stages, and without being part of the action, we cannot ensure that all of the good and proper arguments are raised to support the legality of this agreement, and of course cannot insist that those that have brought the suit are required to go through all of the rigor that must be necessary for them to prove their case. Given these balance of reasons, we have decided that we should be part of the case to better manage this risk, and have taken the steps to join this action as one of the co-defendants.
This is the beachhead camp during January, home to the men and women who will build the main camp where as many as 400 construction workers will live. In our next news video, we will have some construction site activity to share with you. On March 2nd, 1989, Alcan, its contractors, and the 17 unions involved in the Kemano completion project scored a major coup in BC labor relations. Together, they reached an agreement that, among other things, guarantees no strikes and no lockouts for the duration of the project. The agreement was signed in Vancouver with representatives on hand from the Allied Hydro Council, the Kemano Completion Project Employers Association, and Alcan. As well as the no strike, no lockout clause, the agreement provides uniformity of working conditions, participation by local native workers, and it establishes safe and sound construction practices. Grant Brooks, chairman of the Employers Association, and Lou Zakur, Alcan's Director of Health, Safety, and Security, tell us more.
Well, the Allied Hydro Council was an association of unions formed in 1962 to negotiate collective agreements in the province of BC for the construction of hydroelectric projects in the province.
And what about the Kemano Completion Project Employers Association?
The Kemano Completion Project Employers Association will be made up of those successful contractors bidding work on the project who will become members of the association.
Lou, there are some important clauses in the agreement. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about it.
The agreement provides local native participation. In addition, a no strike, no lockout clause for the duration of the project, which is scheduled to be finished by 1994. And it also provides uniformity of working conditions.
As Lou Zakur mentioned, not only have the participants managed to negotiate a little peace on British Columbia's often stormy labor front, but local native communities will benefit from the agreement as well. Although it doesn't guarantee employment for all native workers, those with construction experience will be given hiring preference. Alcan suggested this provision to ensure that native communities in the area would receive some economic benefits from the project. This is a first in British Columbia labor history, as is the no strike, no lockout clause. Although the Allied Hydro Council has negotiated similar agreements with the provincial government before, it's believed that this is the first time in the Council's 27 years that they've reached agreement with private enterprise. Flying over Kemano in early April, there certainly wasn't much to see in the way of construction activity. A couple of executives were up at the powerhouse trying on a new corporate logo. But other than that, things were pretty quiet as usual in Kemano. A few kilometers down the road, however, it was a different story. That's where most of the work on the Kemano completion project is taking place right now. This is the site of the main construction camp, called Sequokan, which, when it's finished, will house 360 workers. More than 35 years ago, Sequokan Camp was home to workers on the first Kemano project. But the old buildings have disappeared, and much of the area was reclaimed by the bush. The first job on this site was to establish a beachhead camp to house the 42 workers who would then build the main camp. This work began on January 4th, and by January 15th, Beachhead was ready for full occupancy. In turn, the Beachhead crew began work on a second temporary camp in the same area, known, appropriately enough, as the Son of Beachhead Camp. Thanks to the efficiency of the ATCO trailer people, this second camp was ready for occupancy by the end of April, well ahead of schedule. Not only were the two temporary camps now able to accommodate 126 people, but the underground services were already completed for installation of the main 300-bed camp. On May 25th, a contingent from the Alcan Board of Directors touched down for a tour of Kemano and the area. Jean-Louis Lemay, manager of BC Power Operations, and Don Timlick, resident superintendent at Kemano, put a lot of effort into preparations for the mini-board's visit. And they, along with their wives Marielle and Jerry, were anxiously waiting the arrival of some old colleagues and friends.
Hi, good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Hello, Jerry. Nice to see you. Bonjour. Bon, tu t'es
Next day, the mini-board was off again for an aerial tour of the area. Following a quick look at Kemano, they then popped up to Sandifer Pass, where preparatory work has begun on the new tunnel between the Nechako Reservoir and the powerhouse. Then they flew on to see more of the vast reservoir. Work on the new tunnel and intake, 500 meters away from the original, isn't slated to begin until mid-1990. Work begins next summer on dredging Tatsunaros to increase the flow of water to the intake. At this altitude, work can only be done during the summer months over the next 3 years. Back on the ground, or more precisely, deep inside Mount Debose, the mini-board traveled down the long tunnel that leads to the Kemano powerhouse. Here they took a look at the excavation for the new KCP generators. As well, they were introduced to the workings of the present facility, including the main control room. The big story in terms of progress on the Kemano completion project was awaiting the tour topside at the Sequocan construction camp, where the main 360-bed facility was nearing completion. On the north side of the camp is the main block of accommodation that also houses the recreation and dining facilities. And across the way, the south unit was rapidly taking shape. The camp was ready for the close to 300 men scheduled to occupy it by the end of June. And what are these workers doing? Well, a few kilometers south of the camp are the Kemano Bay docks. This is where most of the heavy equipment, trailers, and personnel will be coming ashore after their day-long voyage from Kitimat. A great deal of work is planned to upgrade the dock area in order to accommodate the increase in traffic. As well, the road that runs parallel to the Kemano River, connecting Kemano Village, the main camp, and the docks, is slated for upgrading and paving. Just south of the village, work has already begun on the lower portion of the Haretsky Road, which will service the tunnel boring operations. Back at the construction camp, the mini-board heard Del Richardson, the KCP site superintendent, tell them that despite the rough terrain and large number of workers, the safety record at that time was impeccable.
Thing is, we come on a job, as you realize, it's pretty basic. There's nothing here, and the chance of getting injuries are, usually job starting. When you work in the bush, there's minor injuries that can turn to bad ones, but right now we've gone through roughly 42,000 man-hours as of last week. No lost time accidents. So we're kind of proud of that.
Once the tunnel boring and major construction get underway, contractors will bring in workers from outside the area who have the technical experience to handle these jobs. But so far, Alcan has successfully maintained its policy of contracting locally when bids are competitive. As part of Alcan's policy of seeking participation by local contractors, members of the Kemano Completion Project Management Team have been presenting a number of public information meetings in British Columbia. The first meeting took place on December 13, 1988 in Kitimat. Sponsored by the Chambers of Commerce of both Kitimat and its nearby neighbor Terrace, this meeting was aimed at giving contractors and suppliers an overview of the project and letting them know how their companies could qualify for the bidding process. On May 11th, Bill Rich, Alcan's Vice President for British Columbia, made a presentation to the BC division of the Canadian Manufacturers Association. As Mr. Rich points out, much of the work on this project falls under the heading of community relations.
We do have on our project team a great number of people that have come from not only other parts of Canada but from around the world. And I like to find opportunities like this for them to meet other people in the business community and hit the ground running quickly in a lot of dimensions in Canada and in British Columbia and in Vancouver. So it's an opportunity like this to do that. So that's my excuse for having so many tables here tonight.
On May 29th and 30th, Rich and KCP management hit the road again for meetings in Prince George and Vanderhoof. In Prince George, more than 100 business people turned up for the meeting, organized by the local Chamber of Commerce and the Prince George Contractors Association. Prince George is by far the largest center of industry in the area and expects to figure prominently in KCP. Vanderhoof is a town of 4,000 people, about an hour's drive west of Prince George. About 50 people turned out for this meeting. At each meeting, Bill Rich introduced the KCP management team and Alcan to the community, and after the presentation, answered questions from the audience. Bob Loader, project manager, presented an overview of the Kemano completion project, and Paul Wolf, project director, handled the details of schedules and contracting requirements. In our last news video, we reported that the main bunkhouses of the Sawakan construction camp were nearly all installed and ready for occupancy. They are finished now, and as of October the 2nd, there were 385 people living in them. Even so, 3 more units have been added to the east side bunkhouses, bringing the camp to its ultimate capacity of 420. A large, bright cafeteria is in full operation, serving 1,000 meals a day, and the necessary utilities have been installed, including water storage, generators, incinerator, sewage treatment, and septic field. Down at the other end of the camp, the original 42-man beachhead camp is gone. It has been moved 15 kilometers up the mountain to the Heretsky Adit, making room for the construction of 6 new staff housing units and a 25-person guest house. Some of the staff housing will be finished late this year, the guest house early in 1990. As well, service lots have been prepared with utilities for those contractors bringing in their own mobile homes for senior staff. At the entrance to Sawakan Camp, new office space has been provided for KCP management with the addition of this facility. Managers and staff move in late in October. At this point, all the electrical power in the camp is being provided by large mobile generators. However, work has just been completed, stringing new power lines in the camp and along Beach Road. Both the camp and the Kemano Bay docks will soon be served by power from the Kemano powerhouse. Speaking of Beach Road, a section was washed out last year. That section has now been repaired, and almost all of the 16 kilometers from Kemano to Kemano Bay have been paved. In Kemano itself, work has begun on 20 new homes to accommodate the increasing number of construction management and supervisory staff coming aboard with KCP. These will be prefab units purchased from Britco in Langley, BC. Just across the road, next to the existing staff house, ground has been broken for construction of a new apartment block with 24 two-bedroom units. Next door to the village, on the approach to the powerhouse portal, are a number of old Quonset huts, relics from the original Kemano project 35 years ago. Since that time, they have housed the maintenance facilities for Kemano power operations. However, they are sitting directly in the path of the tail race to be constructed for the new generating facilities. Obviously, some of them must be demolished, while those that can be spared will be used by contractors working on the new powerhouse. On the other side of the helipad, in the area known as Camp 5, is the future home of maintenance operations. When complete, it will house operations stores, maintenance shops, and so on. As well as ferrying personnel from Terrace to Kemano and back, Canadian helicopters have been very busy shuttling survey crews up and down Mount Dubose and to various locations along the proposed route of the new 300 kV transmission line to Kitimat. The original transmission line was twinned through the Kildala Pass during construction in the 50s. As a result, the second line requires only 15 kilometers to be built on the Kemano side and 52 kilometers on the Kitimat side of the pass. Next spring, boring begins on the power tunnel between the Tatsa Reservoir intake and Kemano. To permit movement of large machinery, especially the tunnel boring machine, Heretsky Road was widened and switchbacks added. It's a tough job, but not quite as tough as building what's being called the 500-meter road. This road diverges from the Heretsky Road and seems to cling tenuously to the side of Mount Dubose. It terminates near the location of the new powerhouse penstocks. At the head of Heretsky Road are both the old and new adits, as well as the Heretsky camp. Behind the camp, rocks and trees have been cleared to make way for an expansion. By March of 1990, a new permanent camp with two-story bunkhouses will be ready to house the 198 people who will be working on the power tunnel. Just below is the original power tunnel adit, and a couple of 100 meters below that is the new adit. As of October 17, KCP miners had progressed about 100 meters into the mountain. The approach to the adit and the actual power tunnel is a gentle curve. This is necessary to accommodate the tunnel boring machine, which will arrive in components at Kemano in the spring of 1990. Soon after his appointment as President and Chief Operating Officer of Alcan, Jacques Bougie made a whirlwind tour of Kemano and KCP. Jean-Louis Lemay, BC Power Operations Manager, hosted Mr. Bougie's visit to Kemano and the powerhouse before introducing him to John Abernethy, Ed Thomas, and the rest of the construction management crew from the Kemano completion project. Coincidentally, Bechtel Canada Incorporated Vice President Roger Picard was on an inspection tour at the same time. For the camp's guests, Sawakan Family Day began when they boarded the buses at the Kemano Village Mall. In total, about 220 Kemanoites attended the festivities. Not a bad turnout, especially if you consider the total population of the village is only around 250.
Bunkhouses house 30 people. Ordinarily, such a bunkhouse would house 42 people. And we have facilities, washroom and laundry facilities for 42 people. Also,
for most of the families, this was their first chance for a close look at the construction camp. To minimize the disruption to the village, with its limited recreational and service facilities, the more than 300 KCP workers are not allowed into the community. And, of course, the camp is out of bounds for the Kemano folk. Family Day helped to satisfy the curiosity of many of the villagers by letting them see firsthand how the other half lives. On arrival in the camp cafeteria, the guests were greeted by construction manager John Abernathy, the man who dreamed up Sawakan Family Day. Then they were outfitted with the proper headgear and pointed in the direction of the food, which was both delicious and bountiful.
You want some pork and beans, okay?
After lunch, it was time for the kids to play and to have their faces painted. Next door, the adults were treated to a condensed version of Safety Officer Tom Pierce's regular orientation speech.
We're serious about what we're talking about. We're combining Alcan safety regulations, vector safety regulations that I have to work for, and the workers' compensation. So that the rules that we are going to employ here on this job site are much more stringent that you'll find on a normal job site.
Tom's safety lecture is a must for the construction crews. Everyone in camp has heard it and taken it to heart, or else. It was no exception on Family Day. Tom repeated it 3 or 4 times to standing room only crowds. When the families of Kemano finally clambered back aboard their buses, there were a lot of happy kids and full tummies, and generally a better understanding between the folks who live in the village and those who live in the camp. When work begins on the new powerhouse excavation, dynamite blasting will be taking place on the very edge of the village of Kemano, within 175 meters of the closest home. In order to prove the safety and techniques used when blasting in this situation, a series of demonstration blasts were commissioned a few kilometers out of town, mimicking exactly those procedures to be used in the powerhouse blasting. Our video crew recorded the demonstration, and the following mini-documentary was presented to the community of Kemano. Its running time is around 14 minutes.
Work on the Kemano completion project has been underway since the beginning of the year, but so far, most of that work has been in construction of the camps and road building. Just a couple of months ago, though, workers at the Horetsky adit started to blast and drill into the mountain, the first work on the second power tunnel. Here, there's no problem in using lots of dynamite, blasting and letting the rocks fall where they will. There is a lot of room to get well back from the blast and watch it safely. But when work begins on the underground powerhouse extension at the Kemano end of the tunnel, well, there's not quite so much room. The powerhouse plan calls for a number of small tunnels to be made. Some are air vents and others are electrical passages. As you can see, the portals of these tunnels are right on the edge of the village. The house nearest to the location of the blasting is less than 175 meters. My name is Dave Nixon. What you see is the location of the portal of the air intake tunnel for the underground powerhouse of the Kemano completion project. In order to construct it, we are going to have to blast. The problem is that we are also right on the edge of the occupied village of Kemano. Blasting presents problems of controlling the air blast, the sound, the vibration, and rock flying through the air. Here we will have to apply special procedures to control these problems. You're just about standing on the fish. I'm a geologist and the geotechnical supervisor for the Kemano completion project. Most of my career has been spent working on large hydroelectric projects, a career that has taken me around the world to interesting and challenging jobs. In Brazil, Africa, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and the $14 billion James Bay hydroelectric project in northern Quebec. There I helped to carve out the largest underground powerhouse in the world. When people talk about blasting and explosives, very often conjure up in their minds a case where you make a hole and you stuff it full of explosives and you fire it in one big bang. And in fact, there was a day when that's exactly how it was done, but over the years it has become more sophisticated. And today we can take one large blast and divide it into many small parts by using different detonators which go off each one slightly after the other, so that we get a planned progression, a sequence. And in this way, while in some cases it may sound as if it is one single blast, in fact it may be a whole series of smaller blasts, and in that way we can control the amount of vibration, we can control the amount of noise, and hopefully we can control the fly rock, the three problems that we have. At the Hretsky Adit, the tunnel was started by tunneling horizontally into the side of the mountain. But before you can do that, you must create a relatively smooth vertical wall in which you can start your tunnel. This is accomplished with a technique known as pre-splitting. First, a series of deep vertical holes are drilled very precisely along what will eventually be the smooth wall. Charges are then set in the holes with only enough power to crack the rock. When detonated, the result is a relatively straight line crack through the rock. Then, in a series of larger blasts, the rock in front of the smooth face is broken and removed until the smooth face is finally revealed. That is where the actual tunnel will be started, with another technique called smooth wall blasting. In order to demonstrate the techniques of blasting without fly rock, we chose a rock face a few miles south of Kemano. If you look closely, you can see the drilled holes outlining the proposed tunnel opening. Our challenge was to blast a hole here without sending rocks flying. The best way to minimize fly rock is by using a series of smaller blasts instead of one big blast. In our demonstration, we'll be using 4. The thing to keep in mind about blasting is that when you blast, the broken rock and blast pressure must have somewhere to go. On the first blast, this is accommodated by drilling relief holes and by detonating each charged hole in a rapid-fire sequence. In the center of the first blast pattern, you can see a number of large holes have been drilled. Unlike the other holes, which will be filled with explosives, these will be left empty. When the charges surrounding them explode, the rock expands into the big holes and blows out through them. If there was only one blast, the rock wouldn't have time to find the exits. So instead of one big blast, there are a series of smaller blasts, each one 25 to 50 milliseconds apart. This gives the rock from each explosion a chance to get out of the way before the next starts blowing out. The small hole from the first blast is called the burn cut. The subsequent blast holes are called the slash cuts. When the muck from the first blast is cleared, there is then space for the rock from the second blast to expand. Once again, each blast is actually a series of smaller blasts milliseconds apart. And that's it. When the muck is cleared from the slash blast, you then have a hole the diameter of the tunnel you want and about 2 meters deep. To go farther into the rock, you simply repeat the process. You're probably still a little confused about how we plan to contain the flying rock, even though we're doing the job with 4 smaller blasts. These things, made from thousands of old car tires, are called blasting mats, and they're hung right over the explosion. But first, holes must be drilled over the portal and rods with hangers inserted to support the mats. Because of the forces involved, the mat hanging system must be well designed and heavy duty. The rods must be cemented into the rock with a very strong type of grout. You can see the filler tubes for the grout alongside the rock anchors. And to keep the rock itself from fracturing around the blast, a series of rock bolts are embedded all around the perimeter to a depth of 5 meters. In a blast, these literally bind the rock together. And, just for safety, we used a low berm at the foot of the portal to catch any rock thrown out from under the mats. Just as the position of each hole is strategically marked into the rock face, the amount of explosive going into each hole is also part of the blast design. When the charges are finally set in their holes, the cords from the blasting caps are attached to the main primer cord, and it is strung out to the safe place where the blaster will trigger the blast. The blasting cap is what actually gives the series blast its delays. Each cap has a rating for how long it will delay its detonation after receiving the trigger signal. Finally, the only thing to do is lift the blasting mats into place for the first blast. At this time, I was feeling apprehensive. Not only were there a number of representatives from the Kemano community on hand, but John Abernathy and the KCP management were taking a very personal interest in this project as well. Finally, the mats were hung, and the safety crews were busy preparing for the blast. They set out signs warning civilians about the impending blast, alerted aircraft to stay away, and prepared to keep traffic out of the area. We were ready for our first test blast. A series of 15 soundings on a loud air horn warn everyone that the blast will take place in 2 minutes. For me, it could have been 2 hours. Blast number 1, no fly rock, success, and that was the hardest one. Only 3 to go. You did it. It's going to take a lot of time and effort to accomplish these blasts. Before each one, the mats must be removed, the muck or rock from the previous blast must be cleared, new charges set, and then the mats rehung. But this way we can guarantee no fly rock. No fly rock. Success again and just 2 to go. Number 3, no fly rock. 1 to go. 4 blasts and a minimum of noise and vibration. No fly rock. None. Boy, was I happy.
Well, what do you think? We did it.
Though we were congratulating ourselves on a job well done, the real job to come was still in the back of my mind. When it comes time, we'll do it just as we did here. When we blast anywhere near people, there is absolutely no room for error. But, as a safety bonus here, most of the blasting will take place on the other side of and below the Heretsky Road ramp. The ramp will also help dampen any noise. As for the amount of disruption the tunnel blasting will cause the residents of Kemano, all I can say is that it will diminish rather quickly as we get deeper inside the mountain. The blasting will cause some disruption. We want you to know how the blasting is controlled. We will do our best to keep you informed during the blasting, and we hope that you find what we are doing to be interesting.
If you've never been underground, you might think that when the weather started to get cold and wet, workers would appreciate being underground. Unfortunately, in the Heretsky adit, it's nearly as wet and cold down below as it is up top. By year end, drilling and blasting crews, working 3 shifts a day, had progressed more than 600 meters into Mount Dubose. At that point, only 126 meters remain before this access tunnel reaches what will be the midpoint of the 16-kilometer tunnel designed to carry water through the mountains. They expect to be there by early February. Then, a tunnel boring machine will take over for the 8-kilometer grind to the Kemano powerhouse penstocks. It will then reverse back to the midpoint, turn around, and start uphill for the 8-kilometer leg to the new West Tatsa intake, which will be located about 500 meters from the existing intake. Above ground, the snow has settled in for the winter, just as the community of Heretsky Camp is settling in for the next 4 years. 85 workers are living here now, 62 of them in this latest addition to the camp, a double-decker bunkhouse. Facilities will soon expand at Heretsky when the recreation and dining hall, now serving the main camp at Sawakin, is moved to Heretsky. Just below the camp, support facilities and other buildings are rapidly popping up out of the snow. And even though they are working in the cold and wet, worker morale seems to be good. When work began early in November on 3 new tunnels to the underground powerhouse at Kemano, there was concern with fly rock from the blasting, since the work site is so close to the village. However, the expert crews from Foundation Abasco were able to control the blasts while minimizing the impact on Kemanoites. The large tunnel in the center is the new tail race for the powerhouse extension. On the right is the new air supply tunnel, and over on the left is a new high voltage cable tunnel. The tunnels are expected to reach the new powerhouse excavation 400 meters inside the mountain by May. Over in Camp 5, The exterior of the new maintenance building is all but finished. When complete, this building will house all the power operations outside maintenance services, including mobile equipment, grounds equipment, and stores. Next door, 2 new warehouses are also nearing completion. They will replace the existing storage buildings, now located where the new powerhouse tunnels are being worked. Down the road 5 kilometers, the big Sawakan camp has seen a number of changes in the past couple of months. Foremost amongst these changes is a new dining hall and recreation center. Interior work is now wrapping up, and we'll have pictures for the next news video. At the south end of the camp, the long-awaited 6-man units have been snapped together by the ATCO crews. This housing is designed for managers and supervisors who are in Kemano on single status and whose families will not be joining them. Each unit has 6 rooms, each with its own bathroom. At the end of the unit, there's a comfortable living room for relaxing, complete with fridge and stove for late-night snacks. Nearby, contractors' trailers are moving onto pads at an accelerating pace. Although it won't be ready for any bonspiels or tournaments this year, construction on the new curling rink and bowling alley is progressing nicely. The building is 2 stories high. The lower floor will house the curling rink, which will have 2 sheets of ice. The upper floor will contain the bowling alley, which will have 6 lanes of 5-pin bowling. Construction should be finished towards the end of the first quarter of 1990. Next door, we find the new KCP management offices. 50 engineers, managers, and support staff are working in here now, administering to a total of 500 people in Kemano. Traffic at the Kemano Bay docks has been increasing rapidly, to the point where some much-needed upgrading had to be done. Barges come and go at all times of the day or night, arriving on high tide and waiting for low tide to be unloaded. Now that the work is completed, attention has turned to the crew boat dock. A few hundred kilometers to the south, a new crew boat, the Wakwas, has just completed her sea trials and will soon be put into service on the Kitimat to Kemano run. She is 122 feet long, 32 feet longer than the present crew boat, so a considerable amount of work must be done to the docks in both Kitimat and Kemano. We'll have more on the Wakwas later in this video. "35 years ago, when the original tunnel from the West Tatsa intake to the Kemano powerhouse was being dug, it was a matter of drilling and blasting. Slow, dirty, noisy, and dangerous work.
After the drilling, the charging of the tunnel face. Drill holes filled with explosives to blast away the granite, to make a new channel for the waters to come. The charging finished, now came the wiring of the charge, connections to a switch 1,000 feet down the tunnel. Now the face is cleared, ready for the blast. And now,
today, the new adit tunnel is being dug in much the same way. However, safety and working conditions have improved greatly. In recent years, government and industry have insisted on a greater emphasis on safety. Jobs, such as the Kemano Completion Project, have instituted rigorous safety programs under the direction of personnel whose sole function it is to ensure that safety is considered by everyone at all times. Underground, the concern for safety is even more pronounced. Air quality is guaranteed with vent tubes such as this one. Large fans draw in fresh air, forcing out diesel exhausts and dust. Rock bolts and steel mesh coated with shotcrete prevent rocks falling into already mined sections of the tunnel. And each underground worker is expected to be responsible for the safety of himself and those around him. Dennis Crawford, Tonto Mining's safety and first aid attendant at Heretsky, described the safety equipment each miner and visitor must carry at all times on the job.
And as such, once we pass the added portal, Then we have self-rescuers that we wear. We have the reflective vests that we wear underground. The self-rescuers are in case we come into an irrespirable atmosphere, you know, that contains carbon monoxide or some other gas. We have lamps, of course, that we're now going to take underground. We have safety miners that take tests every 4 hours of the atmosphere to make sure that it's respirable. And we have a tag-in board. We tag in when we're going underground, which is past the portal, and then the men take their tags off when they come back from underground.
When work on the actual power tunnel begins in June, the drilling and blasting crews will be replaced by a tunnel boring machine. This means there will be fewer workers underground, and the distance dug each day will increase considerably. Despite this, a machine presents its own hazards, so it is important safety remains the top priority. To this point, weather has generally been good on the Kemano completion project, and work has been rolling along at a fast pace. But it's winter now, and some concessions must be made. Last winter, flooding washed out a section of beach road between Kemano and Sawakan Camp, closing it for some months and forcing traffic to detour. And halfway to Heretsky Camp, a large avalanche washed over the road between Kemano and the camp and blew down this large stand of trees. During more temperate times of the year, helicopter traffic around Kemano is very busy, with large loads coming and going from sunup to sundown. However, in this part of the world, traffic is severely curtailed by fog and low ceilings, not to mention the drastically reduced amount of daylight. As well, since most of the flying is over water, where flight conditions are often best in winter, some of the copters have been equipped with pontoons. This adds weight and thus limits load capacity. Up at the Heretsky camp, which is surrounded by glaciers, ice fields, and the threat of avalanches, specially trained experts have been hired to monitor avalanche conditions, take preventative measures, and prepare for rescue operations. One of the preventative measures is this 105mm recoilless rifle, which they will use occasionally to knock down threatening snowpacks. And in a worst-case scenario, when no other vehicles can negotiate the way from Heretsky to Kemano, we can count on Heretsky area manager Ed Thomas and his trusty Nodwell to ride to the rescue. The Nodwell is a Caterpillar-type all-terrain vehicle with the capacity to carry 8 passengers and supplies through the worst snow of winter. As part of their orientation to the Kemano completion project, everyone is taught the rules and attitudes that are so important for dealing with avalanches and working in the cold. In remote work camps around the world, the same scene is repeated year after year. They're mostly men, although there's a growing number of women, who are isolated from their friends and families for long periods of time. Normally on the Kemano completion project, they get back home for 7 days after 40 days of work. But at Christmas, everyone leaves camp for home, all at the same time. This year, an extra crew boat, the Lukwa, was put into service along with the Nechako to deal with the number of passengers headed for Kitimat and then points beyond. It took many trips for the 2 boats to ferry the 500 workers out of Kemano, and when the last boat was gone, there were only about 20 people left in the whole camp. In Kemano, however, the atmosphere was downright homey. This is the time of year when families are all together. Youngsters who have been out of town for months at a time, attending high school or college, are back for a little home cooking and Christmas spirit. And this is the time of year when the Christmas lights and decorations are dusted off and dragged out of storage to brighten up the long, dark nights of Kemano in December, including this nativity scene created during the original project in the 1950s. But at a time of traditional things, the most traditional element in this community's Christmas is the Kemano star. It's a very simple star, just some lights on a wooden frame, but it has shone over the village every Christmas for more than 20 years, taking on a traditional meaning for Christians and non-Christians alike. This year, however, it was nearly lost. During summer work on the Heretsky Road, the star was inadvertently toppled from its perch and mangled by the heavy machinery. For many months it lay in the bush, until BC Power Operations Manager Jean-Louis Lemay mentioned its fate to Art Cannon, KCP's safety manager. It wasn't Art's problem, but he was one of the 3 KCP people who, along with his family, had taken up residence in Kemano and had been welcomed warmly by the community. He decided to repay Kemano's kindness by personally salvaging the remnants of the star from the hillside and arranging to have it rebuilt and remounted. Today, the star is back just above its original position. The tradition of the Kemano Christmas star can continue for many years to come. Since she went into service in 1975, the Nechako has been the main link between Kemano and the outside world, making the round trip to Kitimat and back, carrying passengers and freight. In an area often shrouded in low clouds and weather too miserable for helicopters, the Nechako almost always got through. She makes the run in 3.5 hours. With a speed of 15 knots and passenger capacity of 40, she is great for servicing the day-to-day needs of Kemano power operations. But once work started on the Kemano completion project, it quickly became apparent that the Nechako was too small and too slow to keep up with the increased demands. At the Nanaimo shipyards, the finishing touches are being made on a bigger, faster crew boat, the Wakwas. For the duration of the Kemano completion project, until 1994, the Wakwas will replace the Nechako on the Kemano Kitimat run. Wakwas is the name of a creek near Kemano and means forest stream in Haisla, the local native language. Originally named the Canmar Tingniak, she was built in Louisiana in 1981 and was employed in the service of offshore drilling platforms. A number of alterations were required before she was ready for work on the Kemano Kitimat run. Wakwas required re-insulation throughout and a relocation of the sick bay. Now she is fully equipped for medical evacuation work and even onboard deliveries when mums can't wait until the boat gets to Kitimat. In bringing the Wakwas from an official crew boat classification to full passenger carrying status, a number of other modifications were made. These include the lengthening of the cabin and the addition of 20 passenger seats for a total of 61. Finally, Wakwas was dressed up in her new Alcan colors and readied for her sea trials in the open waters of the Strait of Georgia. The Wakwas is 37 meters long. With a draft of 5 feet and a beam of less than 25, her aluminum planing hull slices through the water. She is powered by 3 turbo diesel engines, pumping out roughly 4,300 horsepower. This gives her a cruising speed of 25 knots, 10 knots faster than the Nechako.
Vancouver traffic, watch was, gentlemen.
Watch was, Vancouver traffic, go ahead.
Roger, traffic, have you been plotting us over the last 10 minutes?
Roger, we've got your speed presently at 24.4, course of 249.
Roger, that's what we've got.
Being faster means the 62 nautical mile trip from Kitimat to Kemano will take only 2.5 hours, a full hour less than the Nechako. Even though Wakwas consumes fuel at a faster rate, her greater speed means she uses only 50 gallons more per trip. Al Carpathian is now the senior captain of the Nechako, and when the Wakwas eventually goes into service, he will assume the same duties with her. He says he's looking forward to the increase in performance and safety with the Wakwas.
After running the Nechako for 3 years, I think this one will be basically an all-weather boat, with the exception of we have to watch icing up conditions, which occur usually we have to watch that for about 2 weeks a year in February, where the temperatures drop quite severely and the sea conditions are not very kind. But with the extra length and the height of the bow on the Wakwas, I feel that we'll be able to go in almost everything.
There will be 2 crews of 4 each. Al will command 1 crew of mate, deckhand, and engineer. Captain Bob Tucheri will command the other. Since this was a sea trial, engineers and marine inspectors crawled all over the vessel, looking for problems and making exact measurements on performance and safety compliance. High marks were given to Nanaimo shipyards for their work on the refit. There was even a test of the Wakwas' firefighting ability. Down below, the passenger compartment is roomy and comfortable with seating for 61. In the galley, coffee and snacks will be available on each voyage. When the sea trials were complete and the Wakwas declared shipshape, the vessel was officially turned over to Alcan. Along with Captain Al Carpathian, Frank McNamara, KCP's manager of procurement, took possession from the owner of the vessel, Canadian Marine Drilling Limited. The Wakwas is expected to go into service in mid to late February. However, before it can, the docks at both Kitimat and Kemano must be lengthened and supplied with new electrical facilities. But once those details are taken care of, the Wakwas will be rushed into service, operating on the same schedule as the Nechako. Round trips every day between Kitimat and Kemano, except for Thursdays, which will be maintenance day. The Nechako? She's simply going to be on standby for the next 4 years. Once KCP construction is finished, the greater speed and capacity of the Wakwas will no longer be required. Her lease will lapse, and the Nechako will once again be put into service on the Kitimat to Kemano run up the Douglas Channel.